one of them that is probably worth going over is that automated security analysis can never really be aware of what the developers of, or what the intentions of the developers or users are. And so if it doesn't have specifications, if it's just looking at a contract, it's going to look for things that may be a security vulnerability, but a lot of times there might be something that could either be a bug or a feature depending on what you're trying to do. And so just one example of that would be that you could have a crowdfunding contract where a crowd of people are donating funds, and then those funds can be withdrawn by a third party. And that could also be a honeypot. So the same contract code could essentially be used either for people who are intentionally donating to somebody. Maybe they broke their leg and they're looking for some funds for surgery, or it could be that somebody set up a honeypot and they're looking for some dummies to donate their funds and they'll just withdraw them. And so automated analysis tools are not going to be very good at detecting which type of situation this is. This is a simple example, but there are, particularly in more complex contracts, there could be a lot of scenarios where an automated analysis won't tell you for sure whether or not there's a security issue because it doesn't really know what you're trying to accomplish. And that's where more manual audits, where you're actually explaining the design specifications of the contract to an engineer and they're looking through it, they can not only tell you if it's solving the business case that you're trying to solve for, but they can also give you some insights into how you might make your code more readable or make it more efficient. The second thing I want to talk about that's probably worth having on your radar in terms of potential issues that sort of make the horizon of smart contract being solved kind of recede is that there have been some advancements in terms of being able to effectively reverse engineer contracts. And this does have some security implications. So the first one that I want to talk about is a tool called Erase. And this was actually presented at the 27th Usenix Security Symposium this summer with the title Erase Reverse Engineering Ethereum's Opaque Smart Contracts. And so the primary goal of this project was to be able to reverse engineer EVM code, or compiled bytecode, into a form where you could essentially see what the contract is doing, how it works, which if you're an attacker is an invaluable tool for figuring out different ways that you might go about attacking a contract. Or even if you're not trying to necessarily steal funds or freeze funds in the contract, you still might be able to figure out how to sort of take advantage of certain things. And you can see here in this picture that they kind of visualize essentially this is the same type of control flow graph that Mithril uses, except in this case it's essentially kind of weaponized so that an attacker might be able to use it. So a lot of times advancements in automated analysis for the purpose of improving contract security can also be used by attackers to find vulnerabilities themselves. And one example that they gave that's kind of interesting about how the Erase tool was used is that they took the CryptoKitties contracts that you might be familiar with, and they reverse engineered it to the point where they could actually come up with a strategy for how they can go about more efficiently generating rare breeds of cats. And so for CryptoKitties, if you're able to figure out how to generate rare breeds yourself, and you have a strategy for how to do that very efficiently, then that's an attack of sorts. And so what that really means is that if you're developing smart contracts, you shouldn't really consider security by obscurity to be a valid strategy anymore. So using tools like this, potential attackers could figure out essentially how your contract works so that you shouldn't really depend on them not knowing the details of the inner workings of the contract. Oh, and also, I linked to the GitHub profile. So this team did publish a working version of their tool online, and they are continuing to work on it. They're a team from the University of Illinois, and there's actually a second tool that I'd like to talk about that was also from the 27th Usenix Symposium over the summer, kind of similar. This was from a couple of researchers from Charlotte University, and it's called Tether. So the title, Gnawing at Ethereum to Automatically Exploit Smart Contracts. And so the Tether tool, similar to the Erase one in that it reverse engineers smart contract code, So starting just from the bytecode, it creates a control flow graph and is able to create a stack and then a register of smart contract opcodes that it can use not only for the team working on the tool to look at, like in the CryptoKitties case, and kind of figure out a strategy, but this tool actually automatically generated transactions that were provably working exploits. So you run this tool for a while, and it will actually tell you, here's exactly the transactions you should send in order to be able to steal funds from a contract. And so something they cited in the presentation that's kind of interesting is out of almost 40,000 Ethereum contracts, and actually this isn't instances of contracts, this is unique contracts, meaning that the total could be a lot more contracts. Transactions that resulted in, or exploits that were able to result in theft or loss of funds were automatically generated with Tether for over 800 of them. Which means that about 1 in 40 of these contract templates, and potentially a lot more individual contracts, they actually got the tools spit out transactions that they could use. All they would have to do is send those transactions, and they would be able to steal. And this is on the mainnet, so these are actually real funds that you would be able to steal. And no, they haven't published the tool yet, so don't get in a hurry to look at it. They are likely to publish it at some point. I believe that they're trying to do responsible disclosure and potentially getting in touch with some of the folks behind these vulnerable contracts. But it is likely that there are other folks doing similar work who maybe are wearing slightly darker hats than these researchers. And so there are a lot of contracts currently on mainnet that do have funds that are that automated tools like this can find that are vulnerable. And depending on the advancements of these tools, it might actually find vulnerabilities that are not currently known. So to move on, so how much time do we have left?
5-10 minutes.
Okay, great. So I wanted to end with a few recommendations or things that might be a path forward for how security can continue to be improved. One of them is that for end users, this isn't so much a developer thing, but if you're an end user using an Ethereum wallet, whether it's Status, Trust Wallet, Coinbase Wallet, or any type of wallet, MetaMask, there should be better security analysis that's actually baked into the wallets and dApp browsers. And so you can use tools like Mythical, for example, or other tools that are automated, where if you're about to send a transaction, you can look at the bytecode of the contract and determine if you're able to find any vulnerabilities, and you might want to display that to the user and let them know that this could be an unsafe contract that they're sending a transaction to. So an analogy for this would be something like in the Chrome browser, how you have like SSL warnings. So this is the type of feature that I do hope to see a lot more of in wallets in the future. And one possible component to that that's kind of interesting, this graph up here actually shows the number of detected deployments of the ERC20 contract interface in deployed contracts on mainnet. And as you can see over time in the last year or year and a half, it's really increased a lot. And if you're able to use interface detection, if you're able to look at contract bytecode and detect which template or which standard, which implementation of the standard the contract is using, or if you know whether or not it's using a known standard, that could actually be a very useful data point in determining potential risk factors. So if it's the Open Zeppelin ERC20 implementation that has been around for a long time and has a lot of volume, it has a lot of contracts deployed on mainnet, and it hasn't been exploited, that's probably a reason to believe that it's low risk. And if it's a totally bespoke contract, then that might be an indicator that it's more high risk. A second thing is ENS. Who here is familiar with ENS? Okay, great. So there's a lot of people. So ENS is actually very similar to DNS, hence the similarity in names. So when you're using a web browser, you don't typically type in an IP address of a server that you want to visit. You'll type in a domain. And so here's an example of how it could look in ENS, just some name of a domain.eth. And human readable addresses like this can be very helpful for security purposes. you can still do things. A fisher might sign up for an ENS address that has a misspelling or something, so that just like with the web, that is a possible vulnerability. But this is a really big improvement where you no longer have to send transactions to some address. Let's say there's an ICO website that gets hacked and somebody changes the address. Using ENS is going to make that type of thing a lot harder. And then finally, one thing I'm very excited about is formal verification. And so formal verification is a way that you can essentially show provably that a contract doesn't contain bugs. And the picture here, this is a screenshot from the Casper FFG codebase where the Viper language is being used as the Casper implementation. And Viper, compared to Solidity, makes it much, much easier to have formally verified contracts. So I would expect that within the next few years, we'll see a lot more contracts, especially for mission-critical types of tasks that are formally verified. So I'm from TapTrust. We're a new startup. We haven't announced what we're doing yet, but one way I would summarize it is that we're trying to make blockchain technology a lot more simple and secure for ordinary, everyday people. And I wanted to thank you for stopping by and checking out the talk. And we might have a couple minutes left over if you have any questions. 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
So you described in detail how Mithril works and what it does. Is there some place that people can go to learn about the broader swath of tools that are available beyond just that one?
Oh, sure. One place I would recommend, I know Trail of Bits has a repository, I forget what it's called. I think it's like Awesome Ethereum Security Resources.
That's it.
So that has a ton of different things. There's a lot of places out there that have a lot of different tools. The Mithril is a tool that I use, so I'm more familiar with it. But there's a lot of different tools. Some of them have different strengths. I would definitely recommend checking out that Trail of Bits repository if you want kind of an overview of all the different tools that might be useful for you.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, thanks again. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.